Purple Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Ali Sugars, and thank you for joining us. This podcast is about raising awareness for domestic and family abuse by allowing survivors to share their own journeys to recovery. You will find practical yet powerful information and tools that you can immediately implement into your own journey to recovery. You will also hear information on how you can help someone you suspect may be in a toxic relationship. To support this podcast and get access to amazing bonus content, click Become a Patron for more information. If you have a story to share, reach out to me, Ali F. Sugars, on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. Hosts and guests will often discuss sensitive topics in detail. While this is done with the utmost respect and dignity, this may cause triggers for some listeners. Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of the Purple Warriors podcast. And as usual, we have an extremely exciting guest on today who's going to no doubt share some valuable information with us. But today we actually have our first sponsor. So I would like to thank Sandra Santoro from Live Activated. Getting activated helps you to take control of your health and let the aging process know you're in control. Activating your cells can help with sleep, energy, immune, health and pain. Get activated and take control today. So thank you so much, Sandra, for sponsoring this episode. And so our wonderful guest today is Toni Everard from Toni Everard Coaching. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Ali. Thanks for having me on. I'm going really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well too. That's actually lovely to hear. That makes me smile and makes me very happy. So today's topic that we're going to be talking with Toni about is empowering yourself and recognising your self-worth. So an incredible topic, no doubt. So Toni supports and inspires and educates people with the tools they need to achieve their goals and live wildly happy and successful lives. So Toni, just tell us a little bit about what you do, a little bit about yourself and how you came to work in your field of expertise.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Ali. So, I guess my journey into becoming an NLP trainer and a coach and a hypnotherapist all started around 5-6 years ago. It started a long time before that, to be honest, but that's where I guess it all came into action. So my background has predominantly been in banking and finance. Sorry?
That's very different.
Yeah, well, I've had a few past lives actually. I worked in heavy engineering, I worked in hardware stores, but predominantly I was in banking and finance. And I guess if we go back, say about 15 years ago, I was in a place where I found myself to be a single mum. So my daughter was about 2 at that time, and I was married to her dad, and I just got to a place where I felt like my life, I just wasn't happy at all in my life, and I got to a point where I couldn't keep doing my life as I was. So I actually made the decision to leave my husband, and so I found myself to be a single mum. I was working part-time at a bank at that time, and thought, right, I'll go again. And then what happened, fast forward I guess another 5 years to about 10 years ago, I actually woke up and found myself in the exact same kind of situation. So I had a different partner. My daughter was a little bit older, but again I just got to this place where I was like, I wasn't happy at all in my life, wasn't happy in my relationship, and I decided that it was my relationship that was the problem and decided to leave that relationship. So again, I found myself as a single mum, and at this point in time I'd done a bit of study, so I was working another part-time job at the National Wine Centre actually here in Adelaide in finance. And so I was like, okay, look, I'm going to stay single for a while because it seems I don't have that great a track record with relationships. And so I spent the next 5 years really just going through the same kind of motions. But what I found was that I ended up, whenever my daughter was at her dad's, I was out with my friends drinking and partying and living all this crazy kind of lifestyle to kind of forget how unhappy I was in my life.
Yeah.
And you know, after a few years of that, I got to this point where I was just like, wow, do you know what? I'm not happy in my life still. You know, my daughter was a preteen then, and we were really starting to butt heads quite badly. I wasn't happy in my job, and I thought, well, there's something going on here. I couldn't blame it on a partner because I didn't have one. So I thought, well, you know, what else is it? And I thought maybe it's my work. You know, I need to change my work. And I had a pretty crazy job, I have to tell you, but that's where I was at. And so I started looking around what I could do, and I ended up doing a bit of online marketing stuff. And the truth was, I wasn't very successful there either. And that's when it really started to hit home. I thought, shit, you know, I've gone through the partners, I've tried to change my career, and nothing's really working. I'm still feeling pretty miserable, and I'm failing at this new thing that I thought would be my solution. But there was a couple of really good things that come out of that, and that was I met my first coach, and I got interested in personal development. And through my first coach is where I started to get a really good understanding of how I could create change in my life. And she introduced me to NLP. And I actually went off to a Toni Robbins seminar at that time, which was pretty amazing. It's a bit like a personal development rock concert, which was amazing. And I got some really big shifts out of that. And then when I got home to my regular life, I noticed that, you know, that started to die off. And I thought, you know, I need to learn some tools for myself where I can really be in charge of myself. And that's when I decided to learn NLP. So, you know, I went through, and actually it was a 12-month period. It was a very, very intense 12-month period where I went to NLP practitioner training, had huge shifts for myself, decided I would start coaching people, which I did, and I was getting some really good results there. Then I went to master practitioner, again, more huge shifts, helping people at a bigger level. And then I thought, you know what, I want to be able to teach this to people. I want to be able to not just help people one-on-one, but I want to be able to teach people, teach more numbers, have more people going out into the community that are helping people, because this stuff's so desperately needed. And so, you know, I went from, you know, really in a 12-month period from being very lost and, you know, very lacking in self-confidence. I couldn't speak to groups, you know, socially. I had to be drunk before I could really, you know, socialize. And to a point where within 12 months, I'd learned this whole new knowledge of skills. I'd created a new business for myself. I started teaching, and I was speaking to groups and helping people and all this kind of stuff. So it was a massive, massive transformation. And, you know, it's been my absolute passion ever since then. It's just something that I found that, you know, I get I have so much passion for, and that there's a lot of purpose behind it, in that I get to help people every day. So yeah, so that's how I got to be here now.
Do you know, that is actually incredible. And I love the fact that you said, you know, it happened within a 12-month period. That, you know, says to me, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, that a lot of people see these things as something that you have to take years and years and years to overcome. What is your thoughts on that?
Look, you know, I've heard that kind of stuff as well, Ali, and you know, one of my bugbears is when I see things in the news or whatever, that it says, you know, someone's gone through this thing, they're never going to get over it. And that, you know, that's such a horrible suggestion to give someone, because what we know about the human mind is that we have neuroplasticity, which means that whatever we've learned, whatever's happened, you know, we can relearn, we can change, our brains can change. And this relates to our emotional health, our physical health, you know, because we've got this brain body connection that goes on. And when you have the right tools and you understand how the mind works, and you understand how to access the unconscious mind, which is where 95% of what we do comes from, you can make change very quickly. And so this is so important for people to know, is that you don't have to go to years of therapy to change.
Yeah.
You know, when you've got the right tools, you can make changes very quickly.
So then what would you maybe say to someone who who might have experienced trauma in their life, and, you know, they might, and I'm actually speaking from experience here, because you probably know my story. Someone who's experienced trauma in their life, they might come to you and say, okay, I've experienced this stuff. I don't know, you know, that how I'm going to get through this, how I'm going to recover from it. What would you say to someone in that instance?
Yeah, so, and look, and I can appreciate there's a lot of people that have been in these situations where some really terrible things have happened, and it can feel as if that's not something that you can get past. However, we see over and over again, and I see this in my clients and my students, that people do, you know, they can let these things go. And so if we have a look a bit at how your unconscious mind works. So as I was saying before, your unconscious mind is, you know, about 95% of what's in charge of what we do every day. All our behaviors and those kinds of things come from our unconscious mind. So what happens is that, you know, over time, when we've had different events that have happened in our life, is that often when they're traumatic type events, we haven't had the tools or the resources at that time to deal with it, to be able to process that stuff. Okay, and so what will often happen is that our unconscious mind will actually repress that stuff, basically kind of push it away, so that you can get along with your day-to-day life. So it's still probably there that you're consciously aware of to some point, but there's a whole lot of it that's repressed, that, you know, that's just kind of pushed out the way so that you can get along with your day-to-day life. But what often will happen is that, you know, new events might happen, you can trigger things off, and then suddenly you get like a, you know, a refresh of this stuff comes up. And then the purpose of that from your unconscious mind is to really, it goes, okay, here's an opportunity where you could process this stuff to let it go. And so one of two things happens is either we do get some learnings, which allows us to let some of that go, or what happens most commonly is we go, look, I can't deal with this stuff, push it back down, push it back away. And that becomes that kind of cycle where people keep going through the same cycles, where, you know, they might leave a certain work situation and find themselves in another work situation where something's happening that's similar, or they leave a relationship just to find themselves in another relationship where things are happening that's similar. So you can keep going around in these cycles. And so essentially, when you've got the right tools, and this is very much, you know, we'll talk a bit more about timeline therapy in a moment, but when you've got the right tools such as timeline therapy, you can actually use the process within your own mind with the facilitation of a coach such as myself, so that you can learn what you need to learn from those memories that are trapped in the past, which allows the emotion to let go. So all of our memories, ideally in the past, should be either neutral or positive. If they're carrying negative emotion, it means we haven't learned and gathered all the resources that we need from that experience to let that emotion go and take those resources with us into the future. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Ellie? Does that?
It does. And as you were talking, I mean, speaking to the people, to the listeners of this podcast in particular, and this is a question that it always comes up in my mind, because with abuse, you know, it's not that person's fault, because it's someone else that's abusing them. So what you're saying is that it's not what's happened to them isn't their fault, but it's the emotions and the experiences that they have held onto in their body, which is why they might be returning to those relationships. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, yeah, definitely, that's a really good definition to make. So it's never about saying that, you know, it's your own fault that you're going through these cycles. What there is, though, one really important thing that takes people to becoming more empowered in their life is understanding the difference between cause and effect.
Right.
So, and this is where empowerment comes from. Okay, so when we're at effect, which most of my clients who come to see me are at effect, I was definitely at effect. It's where we go, okay, so there's something happening outside of me, or it has happened outside of me, and that's causing me to feel in a certain way, and I can't do anything about that. Okay, yeah. I've been victimized, and I can't do anything about that. I can't make it have not happened, and that's the kind of place, and that's a very disempowered place to be in. It makes you feel as if you've got no options, that you're stuck with this.
Yeah.
But where we get empowerment is when we shift to being at cause. And at cause, again, is not about saying that this is my fault. What being at cause is saying, okay, so I'm fully responsible for where I'm at now. Okay, so I'm fully responsible. So I might not have chosen it consciously. It's not something that I want, but I choose to take full responsibility of it, because if I can take responsibility for where I'm at now, I can take responsibility and control what happens to me in the future. And so this is the most important thing, is to decide that you want to take responsibility for where you're at, how you feel, how you act, and what you're going to do in the future. Because that's where we've got choice. And the more choice that you have, the happier that you feel. Because it's when we feel like we have no choice that, we get into that stuck place. So it's getting to that mindset of going, you know what, I choose to take full responsibility for where I am now, and I take full responsibility of dealing with whatever emotions, whatever emotional limitations that I have, and so that I can change my future.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. That's a really good way of explaining it. So you mentioned timeline therapy before. And I know that speaking with a lot of NLP practitioners, it's often like an NLP, timeline therapy and hypnosis all seem to be something that is all described together. Can you maybe talk a bit about that and how they all work together?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, absolutely. Neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy and hypnosis all very much go hand in hand. And essentially why that is because in the late 60s, early 70s, when Richard Bandler and John Grinder were developing NLP, they studied some very specific people that were getting good results in therapy. So one of those was Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist, and she got really good results, they found, by getting very specific in her questioning. The other person was Fritz Perls, who did Gestalt therapy. And then there was Milton Erickson, who's a very famous hypnotherapist. And what they found with Milton Erickson was that he got really good results with his clients by being very ambiguous with his language, so being very vague. And he would tell people lots of stories which didn't seem to relate to anything, but then all of a sudden they seemed to get some change in their life, which seemed magical. And so with NLP, what they did is they looked at these different things and they turned them into a process. So NLP is very much about having a process. So what specific steps go into, for example, rapport was something that was known in hypnosis, but it was this magical, state that you could get into, which would help your clients accept your suggestions. What NLP did was they looked at rapport and looked at the specific process of what that was. So, if you match and mirror each other, you'll get into rapport. You match breathing, blinking, all those kinds of things. So they put things into processes. And so with NLP, it's very much about the language of the mind. So how do we use our five senses? So like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, and how do we process that through our mind? What are the steps that we do to get the specific results that we get every day? So everything we do has a strategy behind it. We have strategies for falling in love, strategies for buying, strategies for brushing your teeth in the morning. You know, there's strategies for everything. So NLP looks at all of that and how that works, and specifically as well around our language. So many of the problems that we have are formed linguistically. So it's around our words and how we use our words. And so this becomes a very important part of how you become your own best coach, is understanding your language and using your language effectively. And that's also how you can then have a positive influence on other people, is by understanding language, hearing what people are saying, asking the right questions, and those kinds of things. So NLP is very much around the language of the mind. And so you can do a lot of coaching and a lot of techniques just around words that will make a big difference within people's minds. Now, timeline therapy come about, the concept of timeline's been around since Aristotle, like that's not a new thing. Timeline therapy specifically was come about in the 1980s. Tad James, who had worked closely with Richard Bandler, he was doing a lot of experimenting with NLP. He was also a huge fan of hypnosis. He's got one of the biggest collections of hypnosis books in the world, I think, Tad James does now. But he started doing some work with experimenting, and he developed timeline therapy. And what the beauty of timeline therapy is, it allows people to let go of negative emotions from the past and limiting beliefs from the past in a way that is revolutionary, I guess, in that people don't have to talk over their problems. And this is a really key thing, because, you know, a lot of my clients have come to me, they've spent a lot of time going to psychologists, and I'm certainly not bagging psychologists. I think psychologists do some wonderful work. And what we're finding now is that a lot of psychologists are learning timeline therapy. Right. Because what we find now, this is the thing with timeline therapy, and this is what they're finding, is that you can help people let go of emotion without having to talk through it. Because essentially what happens, you know, we've got all these neurological pathways, and when we there's myelination that happens. So you get this sheath that goes along our most used pathways. And so when you talk over and over and over an old problem, you myelinate those pathways. So you strengthen up those pathways. And so people, you know, with all these talking therapies, they'll get some kind of temporary relief, but it's not permanent. So with timeline therapy, what it allows you to do is let go of emotion from the past without talking through it. And so the benefit of that is that people find that they get rid of more of their baggage from the past because they don't have to talk about it. Now, I know this for sure with my clients, with letting go of things like shame. They are able to go through a process to let go of shame, which shame is about I'm a bad person for whatever reason, opposed to guilt, which is I did a bad thing. And often it's to do with stuff, shame's often to do with stuff that they don't want to talk about, or they've never felt comfortable to talk about before. Yeah. And so this becomes really important because they don't have to talk about it. They're then able to go through that process and let that go, which is completely transformational. And it's good for the clients that they don't have to talk about it. It's good for therapists because you don't have to listen to trauma as well, because that can be a real issue for counsellors and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But it allows people to let go of all of that emotional stuff really quickly. So, you know, you can let go of years worth of anger in 10 minutes, you know, like it's, and people have an immediate experience of that. They know that that's gone, that they've let it go. And like physical sensations as well, because these things are held through your body. Your unconscious mind's in your body, your emotions are in your body. So when you let them go, you have a real sense of that you've let that go. So timeline therapy then, you know, as I said, used for getting rid of negative emotions, limiting beliefs. You can also use it for goal setting in the future, which is really powerful. You can create future memories of you achieving your goals, which naturally draws you towards them. And then you have hypnosis, which hypnosis is a wonderful, gentle therapy which allows you to give suggestions directly to the unconscious mind. So, you know, especially once you've done some NLP, you've loosened up someone's problem, you've done some timeline therapy to get rid of a lot of that stuff. And then hypnosis is a really good way to cement in all of that change work, and for, you know, for people then to be moving forward in that changed, transformed way.
That is the best explanation I've ever heard. Well done. It's pieced the puzzle together, so well done for me anyway.
Oh, good.
Well, this brings me to, I'm actually very intrigued and a bit excited because I know that I get to be involved in this bit. So you're going to run us through some timeline therapy. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to pass it over to you here, and I'm just going to let you run the show for a while.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So what I'm actually going to demonstrate with Ali, and I encourage you, if you're watching along and listening along, you know, you can go through this process, but a big disclaimer is to please, if you are driving, this will be a form of light induction. So please do not follow along with this if you are driving or operating machinery. This is something for you to follow along with when you're able to sit down and, you know, you're not having any interruptions. So by all means, take the time to do this process when you've got time to sit and focus on that. Certainly not while you're driving. Okay. So Ali, so the process that we're going to go through is the anxiety model. And I really wanted to share this because I think so many people can really relate to feeling anxious about things at the moment, with everything that is going on. And this is a really simple way of managing your anxiety, of getting rid of anxiety. And so there's going to be two parts of what I'm going to go through. The first will be going through timeline, how your timeline works, and then we'll go through the anxiety model. So just a bit about anxiety. As I said, you know, anxiety is something that is quite prevalent at the moment with everything that's going on. And essentially what anxiety is fear of the future. So it's our minds, when we're feeling anxious, it's a sign from our unconscious mind to tell us to stop what we're doing and focus on what we want. Because anxiety comes from imagining things going in the future how we don't want them, or things going wrong. And, you know, and this is why if we watch too much news or get caught up in too many Facebook stories and all of this negativity that's going on, it makes it very easy for us to get focused on what we don't want.
Yep.
And get focused on things not going how we want them. And this is why so many people are experiencing this at the moment. So this is how you manage anxiety. This is that anxiety model. Okay. And so if you are following along with this, please make sure that you do follow along exactly with how I describe it, because if you follow along with this process, I know that it's going to be safe for you and that you'll get a result. Okay. So the first thing we want to talk about is timeline. So our unconscious mind has this amazing way of knowing the difference between what happened yesterday, what happened 3 weeks ago, what happened 20 years ago, also what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to happen in 2 weeks' time. And so if you can imagine that our unconscious mind stores and organizes our memories in this way so that we can tell the difference in how far away those experiences are from us now, you can imagine that that's kind of created in a line. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, everybody has a timeline, and however you do it is perfectly okay. Okay, so however you store time is perfectly okay. And it will be different from everybody. So people will experience that their timeline is in all kinds of different directions from their body, and however you do it is perfectly okay. So I'm going to go through this example with Ali. Ali's going to be my fantastic demo model for this experience. So Ali, what I want to do is start with eliciting your timeline. So if I was to ask you, and it's your unconscious mind that I'm asking here, so don't think about it too logically, just allow what comes up. If I was to ask you, where is your past? What direction would you point?
Back there.
Back behind you. Yep. Great. And your future, what direction would you point?
Up there.
Up there. Okay, great. So you've got your timeline, the past is back behind you, future's up there. Cool. And so, you know, for the people who are watching or listening, your timeline could be similar. It could be left to right. It could be front to back, diagonal, in any kind of direction from you. Perfectly okay. Okay. So Ali, so you've got your timeline back behind you, going up there for the future. So can you recognize, or can you, you know, using your active imagination, because this is what timeline is, can you see how that implies a line, that there's a line that stretches out behind you and one that goes up?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, great. Okay, so for the purpose of this exercise, when we're going to be using the timeline, what I'd like you to do is use your active imagination to imagine that stretched out in kind of like a straight line for you. Can you imagine that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. And good. So that essentially is your timeline. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to go through a process where you're going to float up above your timeline. And as I said, this is active imagination. Okay, so you're not physically obviously going to float up, but you're going to imagine yourself floating up. And so again, if you are driving, do not do this process while you're driving. This is for something when you're sitting down safely and to do then. So Ali, what I would like you to do is in a moment, I'm going to ask you to float up above your timeline. And when I say float, it might be visually, it could be like sounds floating on the wind, could be like floating on the bathtub. However you do that's perfectly okay. All right. So Ali, can you please just float up above your timeline?
Mm-hmm.
Good. And as you're floating up above your timeline, I want you to imagine yourself floating up above your timeline so that you're in your body floating above your timeline, looking through your own eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, remaining floating up above your timeline, I want you to just float back into the past and let me know when you're there.
Yep.
Good. Now, float back toward now and just stop right up above now, above your timeline.
Yep.
Good. Now, facing toward the future, float up higher and further back into the past.
Yep.
Great. Now, float out into your future.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Now, float up higher and float so high that your timeline seems that it's just 2 or 3 centimeters long, way down below you.
Yep.
Great. Good. Now, float back to now. When you're ready, float back down into now and come back into the room. Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So how was that for you, Ali?
That was incredible. That was incredible, actually.
Oh.
We did this a bit before, and I feel even better now.
Yeah.
When we did it
So
before.
it is something that your unconscious mind, the more you do it, the more your unconscious mind understands how to do it, and the more it works. So that itself isn't actually a therapy. That's just understanding how your timeline is and how to access it and float up above it. But it's an amazing experience just to do that, isn't it, Ali?
It really is. I actually feel so,
Yeah.
more relaxed now.
Yeah, perfect. And because essentially what it does is when you're dissociated from whatever would be currently going on, and so once you do that, you're not feeling all that same kind of stress or anything like that. So
Yep.
perfect. So excellent. So now that you know where your timeline is, what we're going to do now is the anxiety model. So this is a really simple process, and I use this a lot with my clients So as I was saying before, anxiety comes from when we're imagining an event in the future going how we don't want it to. And when we focus on things like that, things not going okay, we get those feelings, you know, it makes us feel uptight. We notice that we're feeling uptight in our body, and then we start thinking, oh my God, I'm anxious. We start thinking more bad things, and it gets into this kind of cycle. So sometimes people have trained their brains, and it can be learnt sometimes, learnt behaviour through family. It can be come from things, you know, that have happened, fear that's still stuck in our past that we're managing to project into the future. So that can happen as well. But however we're doing it, it is the process of our mind focusing on something in the future, not going how we want it to. So this process is a process you can do over and over again as many times as you need to retrain your mind to focus on things going how you want to, so that you don't have those feelings of anxiety. So, Ali, can you think of something specifically that you feel like you could be anxious about at the moment?
Yes, I am anxious about my health and pain in my shoulder. I have a shoulder issue, so I'm quite anxious about that at the moment, and not being able to access the medication and help that I need.
Okay, yeah, okay. So this is a problem, and with everything that's going on, you've been feeling anxious because you think there's a possibility that you won't get the help that you need to be able to deal with that. Yeah, okay. All right, good. All right, so Ali, what I would like you to do is, thinking about this thing that you're feeling anxious about, what I want you to do is just float up above your timeline and float out above your timeline out into the future to 15 minutes after the successful completion of the event about which you thought you were anxious, and tell me when you're there.
Yep.
Good. So now you're 15 minutes out beyond the successful completion. Okay. So tell me about the successful completion of that event.
What do you want to know?
Yeah, so when that event's completed successfully, what is it that you're feeling? What is it that you're seeing? What's happening in your body? How do you know that that event's completed successfully?
So I'm feeling pain-free, relaxed.
Yep.
De-stressed.
Yeah. So if you were pain-free and you were de-stressed, what would you have there instead? So you're relaxed.
Confidence.
Confidence. Good. Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. So you're relaxed, you're confident. How else do you know that that event's completed successfully?
Yeah, I'm just feeling a lot more happy in my body and just relaxed. That's the word I keeps coming to mind. Relax.
Yeah, good, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now turn and look toward now along the timeline.
Yeah.
Now where's that anxiety?
It's kind of floating away.
It's floating away?
Yeah.
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 Good. So the successful completion of that event, you're 15 minutes beyond the successful completion, you're relaxed, you're feeling happy in your body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good. And where's the anxiety?
It's floated away.
Floated away. So it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And
good.
Actually, as I said that, I just felt it go like out of my body. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect. Yeah, good. Excellent. Good. Now, Ali, come back to now.
Wow.
Excellent. Well done. So tell me, how are you feeling now, Ali?
I have to be honest, I was actually feeling today quite a lot of pain in my shoulders, holding a lot of tension there, and there's a lot less pain there at the moment. And I actually feel really, I don't know, you probably saw it in my whole body. I just went, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Tension went out. So yeah, a lot better.
Yeah, perfect. That's really good. And so essentially you can do this as many times as you need to in training your brain. Now, Ali, there's some really good hypnosis you can use for stress reduction as well, relaxation. Hypnosis is excellent for relaxation. So that's something else that you can use as well to keep that relaxation going in your body, which is fantastic. So, Ali, is that something you feel like you could use for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love this type of stuff. I love it.
Perfect. So yeah, hopefully everyone's been able to follow along with that and get some good results there as well.
Oh, Toni, that's incredible. Thank you so much for running us through that. And I really, I really do hope and pray that our listeners, will get the benefit out of that I just got out of it, because I know when I go back and listen to this episode, I'm going to be going through it again. So, so thank you so much, Toni. So now, if people would like to get in contact with you and maybe find out more about how they can work with you, where might they be able to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you'll have all my links to share. So I'm on Facebook. So you'll find me everywhere as Toni Everard or Toni Everard Coaching. So my business page on Facebook is Toni Everard Coaching. I'm currently doing daily live videos on my page as well. So that's a great resource for people to jump on and watch some of those. They're generally never longer than 5 minutes. So I'm sharing all these kinds of tips each day. Also, you can jump on, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those things as well. You can also jump on a free 30-minute call with me. So that is via Calendly. So I'm sure, Ali, you'll have those links there for people who will be able to find that, or else you can go through my messenger on my Facebook page. So you can have a free 30-minute call with me where I can talk to you about, you can talk to me about what's been going on, and I can let you know how I can help you. So, I help people I do a lot of online coaching, which works extremely well. I work with people all over Australia, all over the world, online, so that is very effective. And I also teach hypnosis and NLP and timeline therapy. So I'm looking at delivering that online now as well, with the uncertainty we've got of being able to come together. So so definitely those ways, get in contact with me, and more than happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. And absolutely, I will make sure that all those links are available underneath this podcast. So thank you again, Toni. That's been incredible. I feel so good now.
Good. I'm so pleased.
Oh, lovely. All right. Well, thank you. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone. Bye.